My son-in-law Brandon patted my shoulder during what they called a family intervention. He said I was too old to manage my own money. My daughter Alicia just nodded, telling me the senior living home they found was lovely. I just sat there quietly. I let them finish their entire presentation. When they left, I went to my basement and opened a locked safe they didn't know existed. Before I continue this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to teach someone a lesson they would never forget. My name is Amos Freeman, and I am 74 years old. And on a quiet Tuesday morning, my small, orderly world began to fracture. It started with something simple: groceries. I had been ordering them online every week since my Lucille passed. I typed in my credit card number, the same one I've used for 20 years, and clicked confirm. Payment declined. I tried again. Insufficient funds. A chill one that had nothing to do with the old air conditioner rattling in the window crept up my spine. Insufficient funds. That was impossible. I am an accountant. I spent 50 years of my life making sure the numbers always added up. My retirement savings were enough to last me another 20 years comfortably. I picked up the phone and called the bank. I was on hold for 10 minutes listening to a tinny jazz loop that grated on my nerves. Finally, a young man, his voice cracking with inexperience, answered. "Fulton County Bank, how can I help you?" I explained the situation. "My name is Amos Freeman. My card was just declined for groceries. I have more than enough in my savings to cover a carton of milk." I heard the clacking of keys, a long pause. Mr. Freeman? I'm seeing a flag on your account." "A flag? What kind of flag? I haven't flagged anything." It just says account frozen, pending review." "Sir, it looks like a request was put in by an Alicia Hayes. It says she has power of attorney. She does not," I said, my voice dropping. "She is listed as my emergency contact, nothing more." "I'm sorry, sir, but my screen shows the account is locked. We received documentation. There's nothing I can do from my end. A letter has been mailed to your address explaining the next steps. So you're telling me I can't access my own money, my pension, my Social Security? Not at this time, sir." I hung up the phone. I didn't slam it. I placed it down very, very gently. The anger was so cold it was almost peaceful. Just then the front door opened. I didn't even have to look up. Only 2 other people had a key. My daughter Alicia walked in, followed by her husband Brandon. Alicia, my only child, the girl I'd taught to ride a bike, looked at me with that familiar, weary impatience. Brandon, my son-in-law, a white real estate broker who always talked too fast and smiled too wide, didn't even bother to say hello. He marched straight into my living room, pulled a measuring tape from his pocket, and started measuring the bay window. This window was where Lucille used to sit every morning with her coffee watching the Cardinals in the yard. Brandon was tapping the glass, leaving fingerprints. "Single-pane glass," he muttered, shaking his head. "Terrible for energy efficiency. This whole wall will probably have to be opened up. We'll get a much better price if we stage it right." "Staging it," I said. "Staging it for what?" Alicia walked over, placing her purse on Lucille's polished dining table as if it were a hotel lobby. "What is going on with my bank account, Alicia?" I asked. My voice was dangerously flat. She sighed the long, suffering sigh of someone carrying a heavy burden. "Dad, we had to do it. It's for your own safety." "My safety," I repeated. "I'm trying to buy groceries, not illegal firearms." Brandon finally turned around. He tucked the measuring tape into the pocket of his expensive blazer. "Amos," he began, using that condescending tone I despised. "We can't let you just throw your savings away. You sent $5,000 to some Nigerian charity last week." He said Nigerian like it was a dirty word. $5,000. The anger in my chest began to simmer. "That was not a charity," I said, my teeth clenched. "That was Yemi, Lucille's niece. She needed kidney surgery." "Dad," Alicia cut in, "how do we even know that's real? You could be getting scammed. You're not as sharp as you used to be." "That was Yemi," I repeated slower this time. "Lucille's sister's girl, in Lagos. She needed a kidney transplant. I told you this, Alicia. I showed you the emails from the hospital." Alicia waved her hand dismissively. Dad, those emails looked fake. The spelling was all over the place. They see an old, lonely man. They see family, I interrupted. Something you seem to have forgotten. It was Lucille's dying wish that I look after her sister's family. And that's the problem, Alicia snapped. You're living in the past, you're sentimental. Brandon and I, we live in the real world. And in the real world, you just threw $5,000 into a scam. Not as sharp. I felt the blood rush to my head. I balanced the books for Fulton County for 35 years. Don't you dare talk to me about being sharp. That's exactly the problem, Dad. Alicia's voice rose. You used to be an accountant. Now you're a 74-year-old man living alone forgetting things. That's why we're here. Dad, we filed for a conservatorship. The word hung in the air. Conservatorship. Like I was a child, an incompetent fool who couldn't be trusted to tie his own shoes. Brandon put a comforting hand on his wife's shoulder. It's just a formality, Amos. To protect you from yourself. A doctor's coming on Wednesday for an evaluation, and from now on we'll be managing your finances, just to keep everything safe. Safe, I repeated. The word now tasted like poison. Alicia tried to smile, a brittle thing that didn't reach her eyes. Look, Dad, we're not doing this to hurt you. But Brandon wasn't that subtle. He pulled a glossy brochure from his briefcase and tossed it onto my coffee table right on top of my wedding photo with Lucille. The bright, cheerful colors looked obscene in my quiet, memory-filled room. We even found you a fantastic place, he said, his voice full of fake enthusiasm. Peach Blossom Senior Living, very secure. Nurses on call 24/7. You'll love it. I stared at the cover. A smiling, white-haired couple was playing checkers on a perfect green lawn. It was a prison just painted in pastel colors. I picked up the brochure. The paper was thick, expensive. Peach Blossom, I read aloud. That's in Covington. That's an hour away from my home. It's the best one, Dad, Alicia said. It's not about the distance. It's about the quality of care. You won't have to worry about a thing. And we won't have to worry about you, Brandon added, trying to sound helpful. He then looked around my living room again, his gaze lingering on my furniture, on Lucille's favorite armchair, on the family photos over the fireplace. And we'll take care of selling this place, he announced. It's way too big for you anyway. The market in this neighborhood is hot. We just saw a smaller place down the street, a real fixer-upper, go for $800,000. This one, he whistled, this one could easily clear $1 million. $1 million. So that was the number. That was the price of their concern. They wanted my home. The home Lucille and I bought in 1978. The home we brought Alicia back to from the hospital. The home where every scratch on the floorboards told a story. They wanted to erase it all for a commission check. And just like that, the final piece clicked into place. The bank, the suspicious activity lie, the conservatorship, the evaluation, and now, the house. This wasn't concern. This wasn't protection. This was a hostile takeover. They didn't see a father. They saw an obstacle. They didn't see a home. They saw a fat commission check. I looked at Alicia, the girl I used to swing in the park, the girl I taught to drive. I looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of the child I knew. But I saw nothing. Nothing but a cold, hard greed, poorly disguised with fake pity. They thought I was finished, a confused old man easy to push aside, so I said nothing. And my silence they mistook for defeat. They had no idea that for a man who spent his life making numbers talk, silence is just the space you take to do the math. They left. Alicia gave me one last look, a mixture of pity and annoyance, before she pulled the door shut. The click of the lock echoed in the hallway. The house was silent. But it wasn't the peaceful silence Lucille and I used to share. This was a heavy, suffocating silence. I stood there in the living room for a long time, just breathing. In, out. They thought I was heartbroken. They thought I was defeated. They thought I was a confused old man who would shuffle off to that Peach Blossom place and wait to die. I was not heartbroken. I was not defeated. I was calculating. The anger wasn't hot. It was ice cold. It was the clear, sharp focus that comes when a problem has finally been defined. And my daughter, my own flesh and blood, had just defined the problem perfectly. My silence, which they mistook for weakness, was not resignation. It was the beginning of a plan. I did not go to the kitchen to make tea. I did not sit in Lucille's chair to mourn. I walked to the back of the house, opened the door to the basement, and flipped on the single bare light bulb. The stairs creaked under my weight, a familiar sound. The basement smelled of damp earth, old wood, and history. Alicia and Brandon hated the basement. They said it was creepy and full of junk. The last time Alicia was down here, she was a teenager looking for old Halloween decorations. She had no idea what this room really was. To them, it was just a cellar. To me and to Lucille, it was a vault. The main area was filled with what they expected: dusty boxes of old clothes, Lucille's canning supplies, my old gardening tools. But in the far corner behind a stack of old tires from my 1995 Buick sat a heavy, dark gray steel cabinet. It was bolted to the concrete floor. Brandon had seen it once. I told him it was where I kept flammable liquids for the lawnmower. He believed me. He never looked twice. I pulled a small, unassuming key from the ring I kept in my pocket. This key looked like it belonged to a simple padlock. It did not. It slid into a recessed lock on the side of the cabinet. I turned it, and with a heavy thunk, the bolts retracted. I swung the heavy door open. Inside there were no tools, no flammable liquids, no stacks of cash. There was just a single shelf, and on that shelf sat a thick, leather-bound ledger. It was black with no markings on the cover. Next to it was an old black flip phone, the kind people call a burner phone now. I picked up the ledger. The leather was worn smooth by my hands and Lucille's. I ran my thumb over the spine. Alicia and Brandon thought I was a simple accountant. They thought I spent my life checking spreadsheets for Fulton County. They pictured me as a glorified bookkeeper, a nobody with a pension. They were fools. I was an accountant for Fulton County. But my real job, the one I did for Lucille's father, was different. My job wasn't just to check the numbers. My job was to make sure the numbers were right, for the right people. In the Atlanta of the 60s and 70s, when our people were fighting for every scrap of dignity, numbers were weapons. Numbers decided who got loans, which districts got funding, whose businesses survived. And I was the man who kept the real books, the books that showed where the money really went, the books that powerful men, both black and white, would have killed to see. And Lucille, they thought she was just a nurse. They had no idea who her father was. They had no idea of the power he wielded in this city, a power built not on politics, but on respect and fear. Lucille was his eyes and ears, and I was his left hand. That legacy, that power, was something Alicia and Brandon had no interest in. They were too busy chasing Brandon's commissions, trying to blend into his white suburban world. They had forgotten who they came from. They had forgotten who I am. I opened the ledger. The pages were filled with my own neat, precise handwriting, names, dates, numbers, favors owed, debts paid, promises kept. It was a history of Atlanta that you would never read about in a textbook. I flipped through the pages past names of men who were now streets, names of men who were now legends, until I found the section I needed. R. There it was, Riley Quentin. Quentin was just a boy when I last saw him running around his father's law office. His father, Thomas Riley, had been our lawyer, our shield. Thomas had been dead for 10 years, but he had taught his son well. I picked up the flip phone. I pressed the power button. The small screen glowed to life. Full battery. I always kept it charged. I opened a new text message. I typed in Quentin's private number, a number I had memorized 20 years ago. My message was 5 words. Riley, need to talk, 1800. I did not say I'm in trouble. I did not say I need help. I did not say my children are trying to steal my house. I gave a name, a command, and a time. I hit send. The phone was silent. I stood there in the damp, cool air of the basement, the smell of concrete and history all around me. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then the phone vibrated in my hand. A new message. Old spot, 3 p.m. I closed the ledger and placed it back on the shelf. I locked the steel cabinet. I turned off the basement light and slowly climbed the stairs, the old creak of the wood sounding different now. It no longer sounded like decay. It sounded like a machine waking up. Alicia and Brandon thought they were dealing with a frail old man. They thought they had until Wednesday, when their doctor would arrive. They had no idea. The clock was already ticking, and it wasn't on their side. I left my house through the basement door, the one that opened into the overgrown backyard. I didn't want any prying eyes from neighbors who might be keeping an eye on me for Alicia. I walked the 4 blocks to the bus stop, just an old man in a worn-out windbreaker blending into the afternoon shuffle of Atlanta. They thought I was trapped. They thought they had cut off my money, my communication. But they had only cut off the modern world. My world, the one I had built with Lucille, the one that mattered, was still very much intact. The bus let me off on Auburn Avenue. Sweet Auburn, the heart of Black Atlanta. This street was our history. It was where my father-in-law had built his empire of influence, not with money but with handshakes, loyalty, and a spine of steel. It was where I learned that the real ledgers weren't kept in banks. I walked past the new condo developments, past the trendy cafes, but I wasn't going to any of them. I stopped in front of a small, unassuming storefront, Vintage Cuts. The sign was old, the paint peeling, but the glass was clean. It was one of the oldest barbershops in the city. I didn't go in the front door. I walked down the narrow alley on the side past the humming air conditioners and pushed open a heavy steel door marked Deliveries. It opened into a narrow staircase. I climbed my knees complaining, but my resolve firm. The air grew warmer, smelling of old wood and sweet tobacco. At the top, a simple wooden door. I knocked twice, paused, then knocked once more. The door opened immediately. A young man stood there. Not a boy, but a man of about 35 with sharp eyes and a suit so perfectly tailored it probably cost more than my car. He stepped back without a word, holding the door open. "Mr. Freeman," he said, his voice a low, respectful baritone. "Quentin." I nodded, stepping inside. The room wasn't a law office, it was a private study. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled with law books, history books, and signed photographs of civil rights leaders. His father, Thomas Riley, had used this room as his real office, his sanctuary. Quentin had preserved it perfectly. He gestured to one of the high-backed leather chairs. "I have to admit, sir, I thought you were fully retired." "I thought so too," I said, sitting down. I didn't waste time. I pulled the letter from the bank out of my pocket, the one I'd found in my mailbox after my call. It detailed the freeze and the pending review based on a petition from my daughter. I handed it to him. Quentin put on a pair of sleek horn-rimmed glasses and read it. His expression didn't change, but I saw a muscle in his jaw tighten. "A conservatorship," he said, placing the letter on his desk. "They're claiming you're incompetent. Suspicious activity." He looked up at me. "Your daughter Alicia Hayes and her husband Brandon Hayes. They were at my house this morning," I said. "They told me. They have a doctor coming on Wednesday for an evaluation. They're moving to sell my house." Quentin leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. "They've filed an emergency petition. It's fast-tracked. They're alleging elder financial abuse, that you're the victim of it and that you're a danger to yourself. They're building a case that you're paranoid and confused." "The $5,000, I said. Quentin nodded. "I saw the wire transfer flag. Yemi Adebayo in Lagos, your niece-in-law. She needed a kidney transplant. I have the hospital records." "They're painting it as a classic Nigerian prince scam," Quentin said, his voice laced with disgust. "It's a textbook move. Isolate the elder, control the finances, then liquidate the assets. And Brandon Hayes, he's a real piece of work. I pulled his file the moment I got your text. He's not just ambitious, he's drowning. Drowning. He's leveraged to the hilt. 2 bad investments in commercial real estate. He's in debt for over $300,000 to some very impatient developers. He needs cash, Mr. Freeman. Fast. And your house in that rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, it's his lifeline. So he convinces my daughter I'm crazy," I said. It wasn't a question. "Exactly," Quentin said. "He's the driving force. She's the emotional leverage. They get you declared incompetent, he becomes your conservator, and he sells the house to pay off his debts. By the time anyone figures it out, the money's gone and you're in Peach Blossom senior living." I sat there letting the cold, hard facts settle. "So what's our move?" Quentin opened a file. "The hearing for the emergency conservatorship is set for this Friday, 10 a.m., Fulton County Probate Court." That fast. "They're claiming you're in immediate danger to your own welfare. They want it pushed through before you can mount a defense. They're counting on you being exactly what they say you are, old, confused, and alone." He paused, then looked at the file. "And they got the judge they wanted, Robert Barnett." I felt the corner of my mouth twitch. It wasn't quite a smile. "Barnett," I repeated. "Robert Barnett." Quentin looked up, catching my tone. "You know him. You could say that," I said. "I've known him since he was little Robbie. His father, Judge Thurgood Barnett. Thurgood and my father-in-law were closer than brothers. They marched together, they bled together. And when Lucille and I got married, Thurgood was my best man. Quentin's eyes widened. Little Robbie, I continued leaning forward, was a scrawny kid in horn-rimmed glasses who used to come to my house every Sunday for dinner. He was a summer intern at his dad's firm, scared to death of Lucille. She thought he was too soft. She'd make him extra helpings of collard greens and tell him, "Eat up. Robbie, you'll never make a decent lawyer if you look like a strong wind could snap you in two." He was terrified of her, and he respected her more than anyone on this earth except maybe his own father. A slow smile spread across Quentin's face. "My God," he whispered. "They have no idea." They walked right into it. "Robbie Barnett knows exactly who I am," I said, "and he knows who Lucille was. He knows I am not a confused old man, and he knows I am not a liar." "This changes things," Quentin said, his energy shifting. He was no longer just a lawyer, he was a strategist. "This gives us an arena, but we still need ammunition. They're going to bring their proof. The $5,000. And what else?" I took a deep breath. "They're claiming I'm paranoid." "Based on what?" "I called 911 last week," I said. "Tuesday night, I told them someone had broken into my house." Quentin frowned. Did the police come?" "They came," I said. "2 young officers. They walked through the house. Nothing was taken. The windows weren't broken. The back door lock was jimmied but not forced. They saw me, a 74-year-old man, telling them someone was in my house but didn't steal my television. They filed it as elderly confusion, a false alarm. False. And Alicia and Brandon are using that call as proof of your paranoia," Quentin finished. "That's right," I said. Quentin looked at me, his gaze sharp, analytical. "Mr. Freeman, Amos, was it a false alarm?" I leaned forward in the leather chair, the old springs groaning. I looked the son of my old friend right in the eye. "No, Quentin, it wasn't. Someone was in my house. They were careful. They weren't there to steal. They were there to find something." "Find what?" "That," I said, "is why I'm here. They were looking for my deed, for my bank statements. They were looking for the ledger, and when they couldn't find it..." Brandon and Alicia moved to phase 2. "They're not just trying to steal my house, son. They're trying to bury me before I can bury them." I followed Quentin's advice. I took the bus home, but I got off a block early just in case they were watching. I walked back to my house, the house Lucille and I had built our lives in, and I saw it. The front door. The old sturdy oak door Lucille had picked out. The brass lock, the one I'd installed myself in 1983, was gone. In its place was a shiny new silver deadbolt, a cheap one. My key slid into the keyhole and stopped. It wouldn't turn. They had locked me out of my own home. Taped to the door was a white envelope. My name, Dad, was written on it in Alicia's neat, looping handwriting. I pulled the note free and unfolded it. "Dad," it read, "we had to change the locks. We can't have you wandering off, and we don't know who you might let in. It's for your safety. We have the new key. Just call us when you need to get in or out, and we'll come right over. We'll be seeing you for your appointment tomorrow. Love, A." Love. The word was a slap in the face. They hadn't just locked me out, they were treating me like a prisoner, a child. They wanted me to call to beg for permission to enter my own home. They wanted me to be dependent, helpless. I felt the cold anger rise, but I pushed it down. This was not the time for emotion, this was the time for calculation. I calmly folded the note, put it in my pocket, and walked around the side of the house into the overgrown alley that separated my property from my neighbor's. I walked past the trash cans to the back of the house. Hidden behind a thick, overgrown azalea bush that Lucille had always called her green monster was the old cellar door, a heavy, slanted wooden door that led straight to the basement. Brandon, with his flimsy measuring tape and his talk of curb appeal, had probably never even seen it. I pulled the old iron ring. The door groaned in protest, but it lifted. I stepped down into the familiar darkness, into the smell of damp earth and history. I pulled the door shut behind me, plunging the stairwell into blackness before finding the light switch. I was home. I went straight to the burner phone and called Quentin Riley. "They've changed the locks on the front door." I said no preamble. I heard him sigh. Faster than I expected. He's desperate. "Where are you?" "I'm inside. I used the basement entrance." A short laugh from Quentin. "Of course you did. Okay, Mr. Freeman, this is good. Let them think they've got you cornered. Don't call them. Don't show them you can get in. Let them think you're locked out and confused. Tomorrow, when that doctor comes, I want you to be the confused old man they're paying him to find." "Play dumb," I asked. "Not dumb," Quentin corrected. "Play heartbroken. Play lost. You're a man who just lost his wife and now his children are taking over. You're sad. You're a little vague. When he asks you about the $5,000, you tell him about Yemi, but you sound unsure as if you're wondering if you were scammed. Let him write his report. Let them build their case on a foundation of lies." "And what are you doing?" I asked. "I'm working on Mr. Hayes." Quentin's voice turned sharp. "He's left a trail of breadcrumbs a mile wide. Just play the part, Mr. Freeman. Give them all the rope they need." The next day, Wednesday, I heard them at the front door. I heard Alicia's key in the new cheap lock. "Dad!" She called out, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Dad, are you here?" "We're here for your appointment." I was sitting in Lucille's armchair, wearing my old robe, a cup of cold tea on the table beside me. I looked up as they walked in. Alicia, Brandon, and a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. He looked less like a doctor and more like a high-priced salesman. "Oh, thank goodness," Alicia said, rushing over. "We were so worried. We thought you were locked out all night." I just looked at her. I found the old key to the cellar," I mumbled, playing my part. Brandon's eyes narrowed. He made a mental note. "Block the cellar." "Dad, this is Dr. Fields," Alicia said. "He's just here to talk, doctor." Fields smiled a thin, clinical smile. "Mr. Freeman, a pleasure. Can we just chat for a few minutes?" For the next hour, he asked me the questions. "What is today's date?" I think it's Wednesday. Or is it Thursday?" "Who is the president?" It's the new one, isn't it? The one on TV." Then he got to the heart of it. "Your daughter tells me you're concerned about break-ins." I heard someone," I said, looking at the floor. "I called the police. They said no one was there." "And you sent a large amount of money to Africa," he said, his pen hovering over his notepad. "It was for Lucille's niece," I insisted, but I let my voice waver. "She needed an operation. I think it was real." Alicia said it was a scam. "I see," Dr. Fields said, scribbling. Alicia and Brandon stood in the kitchen doorway watching. Their trap was working perfectly. I was delivering the exact performance they wanted. After he left, they looked triumphant. "See, Dad," Alicia said, patting my hand. "It's all going to be okay. We're going to take care of you." But they were impatient. 2 days later, on Friday morning, the day of the hearing, they escalated. I was on my front porch sweeping when their car pulled up. Brandon got out, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 large men in paramedic uniforms got out of a white van parked behind him. "Dad!" Brandon shouted, running up the walkway. He was performing for the neighbors, his voice loud with manufactured panic. "Dad, you didn't answer your phone this morning. We were worried sick. Dr. Fields' report came back. He's very concerned. He says you can't be left alone." The 2 paramedics flanked him. They were big men, and they looked serious. "Mr. Freeman," the taller one said, his hand on a radio, "your son has authorized an involuntary psychiatric hold. We're here to take you to the hospital for evaluation, for your safety." This was it. They weren't waiting for the judge. They were going to have me committed before the hearing, ensuring I couldn't even show up to defend myself. I held the broom tighter. "I am not going anywhere. I am in my right mind." "That's what they all say, Dad," Brandon said, his voice laced with false pity. "Please don't make this difficult." He nodded to the paramedics. They stepped onto the porch. "Sir, we need you to come with us. Now." I stood my ground. "You are not taking me from my home. I know my rights." "He's paranoid," Brandon said quickly to the men. "See, this is what the doctor warned us about. He's a danger to himself." The taller paramedic reached for my arm. "Sir, please." And just as his fingers brushed my sleeve, a new voice cut through the morning air. "That's assault, gentlemen." We all turned. A black Mercedes had pulled up silently to the curb. Quentin Riley stepped out, buttoning his suit jacket. He held his phone up, its camera light glowing red. "And it's all on video," Quentin said, walking smoothly up my lawn. Brandon's face went white. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Quentin Riley," he said, handing a business card to the lead paramedic. "I am Mr. Freeman's legal counsel. and you are attempting to forcibly remove a competent adult from his property based on fraudulent claims." The paramedic looked at the card, then at Riley, then at me. His professional demeanor snapped back into place. "We're acting on a doctor's order, sir, filed by the family." "A doctor who was paid for a specific result," Riley said, his voice like ice. "A result my client's son-in-law, Mr. Hayes, needs to liquidate this property to pay off $300,000 in defaulted business loans." Brandon looked like he'd been punched. That's a lie." "Is it?" Riley said. "Then you won't mind me showing my evidence of your wire transfers and default notices to the judge and to the medical board that licenses Dr. Fields. Now I suggest you and your team leave immediately, unless you'd like to be named as co-conspirators in a felony elder abuse and fraud case." The paramedics didn't need to be told twice. They looked at Brandon with pure disgust, turned around, and were back in their van in less than 10 seconds. Brandon was left shaking on my lawn, his mask of concern completely gone, replaced by pure, unfiltered rage. He pointed a trembling finger at me. You think this changes anything? You think this smart-ass lawyer can save you? You're a confused old man. The hearing is in 2 hours. The judge will see the truth. You're finished, old man. You're finished." He spit on my lawn, scrambled back into his car, and sped off. I looked at Quentin. He calmly put his phone back in his pocket. "He's rattled, and he's overconfident. That's exactly where we want him." I nodded, my heart pounding, but my mind clear. "It's time, then." "It's time," Quentin agreed. "Go put on your best suit, Mr. Freeman. We have a court to attend." It was late, the night before the hearing. The house was so quiet I could hear the old refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Outside, the city of Atlanta was alive, but in my living room, it felt like the world was holding its breath. This was the last night I would spend as Amos Freeman, the confused old man. Tomorrow I would be something else. I sat in Lucille's armchair, the one they thought they'd be selling at an estate sale. I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. I'd spent my entire life preparing for moments like this, moments where everything came down to the numbers, to the facts. And my facts were solid. The burner phone in my pocket vibrated. I picked it up. A new text from Quentin Riley. "Call me, urgent." I dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Freeman?" "Quentin, you sound like you found something." I heard the sound of paper shuffling. "I found everything." Quentin's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Brandon Hayes isn't just in debt. He's at the bottom of a canyon and the walls are crumbling. That $300,000 was just the start." "Go on," I said. "He's been playing games with his clients' escrow accounts, taking short-term loans to cover his investment losses. He's been promising a major developer, Apex Properties, a prime parcel in your neighborhood for a new condo development. He promised them your land, Mr. Freeman. He signed a preliminary contract with them contingent on him securing the title." "A title he doesn't have," I stated. "A title he was trying to get. That's why he needed the conservatorship. That's why he sent someone to your house. He was looking for the deed. He was looking for your original bank statements, your will, anything he could use to prove you were incompetent and that he was the sole heir." "Greed," I said softly. "It makes men so sloppy. He assumed everything would just fall to Alicia." "He assumed you were a simple man with a simple will," Quentin said. "He assumed wrong. With this evidence of his financial crimes added to the recording I got on your porch, we can destroy his credibility. We can paint him as a desperate, fraudulent actor." I was silent for a long moment. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator. "Mr. Freeman, are you there?" "I'm here, Quentin," I said. "You've done good work. His motives are clear, but there's something else. Something you need to know before we walk into that courtroom." "What is it?" "It's about the house," I said. "Brandon isn't just desperate. He's a fool. He's trying to sell something that can never be sold." "What do you mean?" Quentin asked, his voice sharp. "A court-appointed conservator could liquidate assets." "Not this asset," I interrupted. "Quentin, you know who Lucille's father was. You know what he represented in this city. When Lucille and I bought this house in 1978, it wasn't just a home. It was a promise." I leaned back in the chair, remembering. Lucille. She was her father's daughter. She never trusted banks, and she never trusted politicians. She'd seen too much. She'd seen how our people's homes were stolen, rezoned, or taken for pennies by the city. She always told me, Amos, the only thing they can't take from you is what you've already given away. What did you do, Mr. Freeman? Quentin's voice was barely a whisper. We set up a trust. Back in 1972, before we even bought this specific house, we established the Freeman Family Heritage Trust. A trust, Quentin repeated. It's ironclad. I don't technically own this house. I am the lifetime trustee. I have the right to live here undisturbed until the day I die. I control the property. I maintain it. But I do not hold the title in my name. I could hear Quentin typing furiously on his computer, searching the county records. I see it, he said, his voice full of awe. The Lucille and Amos Freeman Heritage Trust. My God, Mr. Freeman, it's been recorded for over 50 years. That's right, I said. And the trust has very specific terms. The moment I take my last breath, the very second I do, the ownership of this property, this house and this land, transfers entirely. To Alicia, Quentin said. No, I said. Lucille was very specific. She loved Alicia, but she saw the weakness in her. She saw how easily Alicia was swayed by shiny things, by men like Brandon. She said, "This house is our legacy, Amos. It's not a paycheck, it's a statement. This land has our history in its soil. Leaders of our community met in that basement you were in. We planned marches from my kitchen table. We sheltered people who needed protecting." So where does it go? Quentin asked. It goes to the one place Lucille believed would protect that legacy forever. The property transfers free and clear as a historical gift to her alma mater, Spelman College. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the phone. Mr. Freeman, Quentin finally said, they've built their entire case, their entire crime, around selling an asset that belongs to one of the most powerful institutions in Atlanta. That's right, I said. Brandon is trying to steal a house that isn't mine to give. He's trying to get a conservatorship to liquidate an asset that cannot be liquidated. That's what his intruder was looking for. He couldn't find the deed because there is no deed in my name. He couldn't find the trust documents because they're not in this house. The only copy is in a vault at a different bank. He's a common greedy fool, Quentin, and he never looked deep enough. Quentin let out a low whistle. Mr. Freeman, they aren't just walking into a hearing tomorrow, they're walking into an ambush. Their entire case is fraudulent from the premise to the conclusion. A judge, especially this judge, will see this as an attack not just on you, but on the legacy of his father's closest friends. That's the plan, I said. Brandon Hayes thinks he's fighting a confused old man for $1 million check. He doesn't realize he's fighting Lucille Freeman's last will, and that is a fight he has already lost. I'll see you in the morning, Mr. Freeman, Quentin said, his voice full of a new, hard energy. This is going to be a day for the history books. Yes, it will, I said. Thank you, Quentin. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence. I looked across the room at the framed photograph of Lucille on the mantel. She was young, smiling, her eyes full of the fire I fell in love with. They forgot who you were, Lucille, I whispered to the picture. They forgot what we built. They thought your legacy was just money. Tomorrow we remind them. I stood up, my knees cracking, and walked to my bedroom. I opened the closet, pushing aside the old sweaters and the worn-out windbreakers. I reached to the very back past the clothes I wore every day and pulled out a heavy canvas garment bag. I unzipped it. Inside, protected by the darkness, hung a 3-piece suit, charcoal gray, perfectly pressed. The one I had worn to Lucille's funeral. The one I had worn when I buried my best friend Thurgood Barnett. It's been a long time since I wore this, I said to the empty room. I think it's time. Quentin Riley and I arrived at the Fulton County Probate Court at 9:30 a.m. The hallways were a dull beige smelling of floor wax and stale coffee. They were designed to make you feel small, to make you feel like a case number, not a person. This was their territory. This was their machine. Quentin, in his perfect dark blue suit, looked like he owned the building. I walked beside him. I was not a case number. I was Amos Freeman. I had dressed with care. The charcoal gray 3-piece suit still fit perfectly. It was old, but the quality of the fabric and the cut were timeless. It was a suit from an era when a man's clothing was a statement of his character. I wore a crisp white shirt, a subtly patterned silk tie in a deep burgundy, and the gold cufflinks Lucille had given me on our 30th anniversary. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. I was not the man who had been sitting in a stained robe pretending to be confused. I was not the man they had tried to lock in his own home. I was the man who had balanced the books. I was Lucille's husband. We pushed through the heavy wooden doors of Courtroom 3B. It was just as I remembered. Pale wood fluorescent lights humming overhead. A scattering of people sat on the hard benches looking nervous or bored. At the front, at the plaintiff's table on the right, sat Alicia and Brandon. They were already there, whispering animatedly with a man in a rumpled suit. This must be their lawyer. He looked young, eager, and slightly out of his depth, like a man who believed everything his clients told him. When I walked into the courtroom, my daughter Alicia saw me first. She didn't gasp. She didn't look ashamed. She giggled. She put her hand over her mouth and leaned in to whisper to Brandon. I saw her shoulders shaking. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew what she was saying. Look at him. He thinks he's going to church. She saw my suit not as a sign of strength, but as the pathetic last-ditch effort of a senile old man. My son-in-law Brandon turned his head. He looked right at me. His eyes swept over my suit, my polished shoes. He didn't giggle. He just shook his head slowly, a look of performative pity on his face. He was practicing for the judge. He was crafting his expression of a long-suffering son burdened by a father who had lost his mind. He then turned his back to me, dismissing me completely, and said something to his lawyer. They were so confident. They were so sure of their victory. They saw my presence, my suit, my lawyer, as nothing more than a final, meaningless gesture. Quentin and I did not sit in the back. We walked down the center aisle. Every step my polished shoes took on the tile floor was a deliberate, measured beat. We walked past the plaintiff's table. I did not look at my daughter. I did not look at her husband. I kept my eyes fixed on the empty judge's bench. We took the defendant's table on the left. I sat down, placing my hands one over the other on the smooth, cool wood in front of me. I sat perfectly still. My back was straight. Quentin sat beside me, opening a single thin file. He arranged a pen and a legal pad. He did not look hurried. He did not look worried. He looked prepared. The room began to fill. The clock on the wall ticked. 10 a.m., 10:01, 10:02. Brandon kept looking at his watch, then at the door, then at his lawyer, whispering. He was anxious. He needed this to be over. He needed that money. At 10:04, the door beside the judge's bench opened. A bailiff, a large man with a weary face, stepped out. "All rise," he said, his voice booming. "The probate court of Fulton County is now in session. The Honorable Judge Robert Barnett presiding." We all stood. The sound of shuffling feet and creaking benches filled the room. And then Robert Barnett walked in, his black robes flowing. He was not little Robbie anymore. He was a man in his late 50s, his hair graying at the temples. He carried the air of authority that came with decades of listening to grief, to greed, and to lies. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. He walked to his bench, sat down, and began shuffling through the papers of the first case. "Please be seated," the bailiff said. We sat. Judge Barnett put on a pair of reading glasses. He looked down at the file in front of him. "Good morning. We will begin with the probate calendar. First case 2024 G112, a petition for emergency conservatorship for an Amos Freeman." He was reading the name off the paper. It was just a name to him. Just another file. Alicia and Brandon's lawyer stood up immediately, his voice a little too loud. "Yes, Your Honor. Patrick Sims on behalf of the petitioners Alicia and Brandon Hayes." He gestured to my daughter and son-in-law, who were both putting on their best "we're so worried" faces. "And," the lawyer continued, "I see the respondent, Mr. Freeman, has managed to find counsel." He said it with a smirk in his voice. Judge Barnett sighed, the sound of a man who had a long day ahead of him. "Very well. Is the respondent present?" Quentin Riley stood up. "He is, Your Honor." "And who are you, counselor?" Barnett asked, still looking down at his papers. "Quentin Riley, Your Honor, representing Mr. Amos Freeman." At the name Riley, Judge Barnett's head twitched. He knew that name. He knew Thomas Riley, but he was still focused on the paperwork. "I see," the judge said. "I've read the petition. These are very serious claims, and the doctor's report from a Dr. Fields. It paints a troubling picture. Mr. Sims, you may begin. Why is this an emergency?" This was it, the moment they had paid for. But before the lawyer could speak, Judge Barnett did one simple thing. He finished his sentence, and then he looked up. He looked up from his papers to see the man he was about to declare incompetent. His eyes scanned our table. They passed over Quentin Riley, then they landed on me. I did not smile. I did not scowl. I did not look afraid. I simply looked at him. I looked at little Robbie Barnett just as I used to look at him across my Sunday dinner table. Robert Barnett froze. It was not a dramatic movie-like gasp. It was something more real, more terrifying. His entire body went rigid. His hand, which had been holding a pen, stopped moving. The pen slipped from his fingers. It clicked loudly as it hit the wooden bench, then rolled onto his papers. He didn't notice. His face, the face of a confident, powerful judge, went pale. The blood drained from it. He stared at me, his mouth opened slightly. The entire courtroom was silent, watching him. Alicia and Brandon's lawyer, who had been taking a deep breath to start his speech, stopped. He looked confused. Your Honor. Judge Barnett didn't hear him. His eyes were locked on mine. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was not seeing a case number. He was seeing his past. He was seeing his father's best friend. He was seeing the woman who used to bully him into eating his greens. He leaned forward, forgetting his microphone was on. The entire courtroom heard his sharp, choked whisper, My God." He wasn't speaking to the court. He was speaking to himself. Is that really him?" He looked from my face to my suit to my hands resting on the table. Then his gaze snapped to the nameplate on the file in front of him. Freeman Amos. He looked back at me. The confusion was gone, replaced by something else. A dawning, horrified realization. He leaned back toward his microphone, his hand visibly shaking as he reached for his gavel. He missed it on the first try. "Mr. Sims," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse, strained. "There appears to be an issue." Every person in that courtroom, the lawyers, the other families, the bailiff, swiveled their heads. They turned away from the judge and stared directly at me. They were all wondering the same thing. Who was this old man in the charcoal gray suit? Alicia and Brandon were staring too. Their smugness was gone, replaced by a sudden sickening confusion. "Dad," Alicia whispered, her voice loud in the silence. "What's going on?" They had no idea who I was. They had no idea who he was. They had no idea what they had just done. Judge Barnett gripped the edges of his bench. He looked for one long second at Alicia and Brandon. They were still staring at him, utterly bewildered by his reaction. Then his gaze, now hard as flint, moved to their lawyer, Mr. Sims. "Mr. Sims," Judge Barnett said, his voice now a low, dangerous rumble. "You have the floor. You filed this emergency petition. You had better explain to this court in excruciating detail why you have brought this matter before me." The lawyer Sims was a shark in a cheap suit. He smelled blood, or in this case, a quick and easy win. He was oblivious to the undercurrents in the room. He only saw a judge who seemed agitated, which he probably mistook for being upset at me. "Thank you, Your Honor," Sims said, puffing out his chest. He grabbed a stack of papers from his table. "This is, as you noted, a tragic but straightforward case of elder cognitive decline." He started to pace, a move he must have seen in a movie. "Mr. Amos Freeman," he said, pointing at me without looking at me, "is a 74-year-old man, a respected former county employee, now sadly in a state of advanced decline. His loving daughter and son-in-law, my clients," he gestured to Alicia and Brandon, who both put on their masks of solemn concern, "have stepped in to protect him from himself." "Protect him from what, Mr. Sims?" Judge Barnett asked, his voice flat. "From his own delusions, Your Honor, from his paranoia, from the predators who prey on the elderly. I direct your attention to Exhibit A in the petition, a bank transfer dated 2 weeks ago for $5,000, sent to a Nigerian prince scam." A few people in the back of the courtroom murmured. Sims smiled. He had them. $5,000 of his retirement savings, Your Honor. Gone. Just like that, when his daughter misses. Hayes questioned him about it. He became belligerent, claiming it was for a sick relative, a classic textbook justification. "And there's more," Sims continued, warming up. "Exhibit B, a 911 call transcript from last Tuesday. Mr. Freeman called the police claiming, and I quote, 'someone was in his house.' The police did a full sweep. Nothing was taken, nothing was disturbed. The officer's report, which you have, concludes, subject appears confused and paranoid, a false alarm, a delusion." Brandon was nodding gravely. Alicia was dabbing at a dry eye with a tissue. It was a perfect performance. "And finally, Your Honor," Sims said, going for the kill. "Exhibit C, the expert medical report from Dr. Alan Fields, a respected geriatric psychiatrist. Dr. Fields, after a thorough in-house evaluation, concludes that Mr. Freeman is suffering from cognitive impairment consistent with early-onset dementia. He states, and I quote, "Mr. Freeman is no longer capable of making sound financial or medical decisions and represents a danger to his own welfare." Sims clasped his hands in front of him. "Your Honor, my clients are heartbroken. They love this man, but they cannot stand by and watch him be scammed out of his life savings. They cannot watch him live in a state of paranoia. They are asking this court to grant this conservatorship so they can do one simple thing: protect him, so they can sell his oversized, unmanageable home and use the proceeds to move him to a high-quality, secure facility, Peach Blossom Senior Living, where he can be safe and cared for." He sat down. He looked at Brandon and Alicia and gave them a subtle, confident nod. He believed he had just won. The courtroom was silent. Judge Barnett sat there, his face unreadable. He looked down at the report from Dr. Fields. He tapped it once with his finger. "Thank you, Mr. Sims," the judge said, his voice cold. He then turned his full attention to our table. "Mr. Riley," he said, "your client has been accused of being paranoid, delusional, and incompetent. How do you respond, Quentin?" Riley stood up. He was calm. He was still. He did not pace. He stood in one spot, radiating a confidence that made Sims's performance look like a high school play. "Your Honor," Quentin began, his voice clear and precise, "we respond by moving for an immediate dismissal of this entire petition on the grounds of perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud, and felony elder abuse." Sims jumped out of his chair. "Objection. Your Honor, that is baseless. It's an insult." Judge Barnett slammed his gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Sims. You had your say. Now Mr. Riley will have his." He looked at Quentin. "Those are very serious accusations, Mr. Riley. You had better have more than words." "I do, Your Honor," Quentin said. "Let's address Mr. Sims's evidence piece by piece. First, Exhibit A, the alleged Nigerian prince scam." He placed a document in front of the court clerk. "This is Defendant's Exhibit 1. It is a notarized affidavit from Dr. Kioma Okiki, Chief of Transplant Surgery at Lagos University Teaching Hospital, and a sworn statement from Ms. Yemi Adebayo, Mr. Freeman's great-niece by marriage. They confirm the $5,000 was an emergency payment for a kidney transplant that saved Ms. Adebayo's life. The surgery took place 11 days ago. It was a success. It was not a scam, Your Honor. It was an act of compassion." I saw Alicia flinch. Her eyes widened. He actually found them," she whispered to Brandon. Brandon's face was starting to lose its color. "Second," Quentin continued, his voice gaining strength, "Exhibit B, the paranoid delusion about a break-in." He placed another document down. "This is Defendant's Exhibit 2. It is a sworn confession from a Mr. Michael Roper, a locksmith with a criminal record. Mr. Roper has confessed that he was paid $2,000 in cash by Mr. Brandon Hayes." Quentin pointed directly at my son-in-law. "To illegally enter Mr. Freeman's residence, search for financial documents, specifically a will and the deed to the house, and to make it look like nothing was taken. The 911 call wasn't a delusion, Your Honor. It was the only reason Mr. Roper was frightened off before he could find what Mr. Hayes had sent him for." Brandon Hayes shot out of his chair. "That is a lie. A complete lie. I've never seen that man in my life. He's lying." Judge Barnett slammed his gavel so hard the entire courtroom jumped. "Mr. Hayes, you will sit down and you will be silent, or I will have the bailiff remove you. This is your one and only warning." Brandon sat, his face now a sickly shade of gray. He was sweating. Alicia was staring at her husband, her mouth open in horror. Brandon, what did he just say? You hired someone to break into my father's house." "He's lying. Baby, he's lying," Brandon hissed, but his eyes were darting toward the exit. "And finally," Quentin Riley said, his voice cutting through their panicked whispers, "Exhibit C, the expert report from Dr. Alan Fields claiming my client is incompetent, and the failed illegal attempt to have Mr. Freeman involuntarily committed this very morning, an attempt I personally witnessed." He held up a small digital audio recorder. "This is Defendant's Exhibit 3. It is a full high-definition audio recording of the confrontation on Mr. Freeman's porch less than 3 hours ago. I will not play it all, Your Honor, but I will direct you to a key moment." Quentin pressed a button. Brandon's voice, loud, clear, and filled with rage, filled the silent courtroom. "You think this smart-ass lawyer can save you? You're a confused old man. The hearing is in 2 hours. The judge will see the truth. You're finished, old man. You're finished." Quentin pressed pause, and in the moments just before that, Mr. Hayes admitted on this same recording to his plan and to illegally changing the locks on Mr. Freeman's home to keep him controlled. "I ask you, Your Honor, does that sound like a heartbroken son-in-law, or does it sound like a criminal furious that his plan has been discovered?" Sims, the lawyer, looked like he was going to be sick. He was staring at his clients, his face pale with the realization that he had been lied to, that he had built his entire case on a mountain of perjury. "Your Honor," Sims stammered, I was not aware of—" "And as for Dr. Fields," Quentin continued, "we have already faxed this recording and Mr. Roper's confession to the State Medical Board. I suspect Dr. Fields' expert opinion will be under review by the end of the day." The room was electric. The people in the back were leaning forward, mesmerized. This was not a boring probate case. This was an execution. Alicia had her head in her hands. "Oh my God, Brandon, what did you do? What did you do?" "Shut up, Alicia. Just shut up." Brandon snapped, his mask of civility completely gone. Quentin Riley let the silence hang for a beat. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dropping, "as you can see, this petition is not about concern. It is not about safety. It is a malicious, fraudulent attempt by Mr. Brandon Hayes to gain control of my client's assets to pay off his own massive, spiraling debts." He held up one final single sheet of paper. "And that, Your Honor, brings us to the entire basis of their petition, the true target, the house, which is where this disgusting family dispute officially becomes a criminal conspiracy of astounding stupidity." Quentin Riley let that accusation hang in the air. A criminal conspiracy of astounding stupidity. Brandon Hayes was vibrating with rage and panic. He's bluffing, Your Honor. He's got nothing. I have a right to protect my family's assets." "Your family's assets," Quentin repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "You mean Mr. Freeman's house?" "It's my wife's inheritance," Brandon shouted. "Is it?" Quentin said. He held up the single sheet of paper he'd been saving. "Your Honor, Defendant's Exhibit 4. This is a copy of a preliminary sales contract signed by Mr. Brandon Hayes, promising the sale of the property at 1421 Oakmont Drive, Mr. Freeman's home, to a developer, Apex Properties, for $1.8 million. The sale was, of course, contingent on Mr. Hayes securing the title via this conservatorship." Sims, the lawyer, just sank his head into his hands. His case was not just dead, it was toxic. "He signed a contract," Judge Barnett said, his voice a low growl. "He signed a contract to sell a house he did not own." "Exactly, Your Honor," Quentin said. "Which brings me to the stupidity part of my summary. Mr. Hayes's entire plan, his entire conspiracy, from the fraudulent medical reports to the criminal break-in, was based on one fatal, idiotic assumption that he could sell this house." Quentin placed one last document on the clerk's desk. "Defendant's Exhibit 5, the founding charter of the Lucille and Amos Freeman Heritage Trust, filed with the state of Georgia in 1972. Brandon's confused, angry expression went blank. The what?" "A trust, Mr. Hayes," Quentin explained as if to a child. "Mr. Freeman does not own his home. He has not owned it for over 50 years. He is the lifetime trustee. He has the right to live there undisturbed until his death, but he does not hold the title. He cannot sell it, and therefore no conservator can ever sell it for him." The color drained from Brandon's face. He looked deflated. So it just sits there?" "Not at all." Quentin smiled. "The terms of the trust are very clear. The moment Mr. Freeman passes, the instant he does, the full unencumbered title to the property, the house, the land, and all its contents transfers immediately." Alicia, who had been sitting in a state of catatonic shock, suddenly looked up. A desperate, greedy light flickered in her eyes. "Transfers to me," she whispered. Quentin looked at her. It was the first time he had addressed her directly. "No, Mrs. Hayes, not to you." He turned back to the judge. The trust bequeaths the entire property as a historical and educational gift to the alma mater of Mr. Freeman's beloved late wife Lucille Freeman. The house, Your Honor, belongs to Spelman College." The explosion was immediate. "What?" Alicia shrieked, jumping up from her chair so fast it screeched backward on the floor. "Spelman, you're kidding me. You're lying. Dad." She wheeled on me, her face a mask of pure, ugly rage. "Dad, you can't do that. That's my house. That's my inheritance. That's my money. After everything I did for you, you give my money to a college." It was the first time I spoke. My voice, quiet but clear, cut through her screeching. "Your inheritance, Alicia," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "was your education at Howard University, which I paid for in full. Your inheritance was the down payment on your first house, which Lucille and I gave you. Your inheritance was the 5 times I bailed your husband out of his bad investments with my own savings." I stood up slowly, my hands resting on the table. This house was your mother's legacy. It was our history, and you saw it as a paycheck. Your mother was right. She knew you would. You bastard!" she screamed, her face contorted. "You old crazy! Silence!" Judge Barnett's gavel crashed down. It wasn't a tap. It was a roar of thunder. He was standing now, his face a deep, furious red, his eyes blazing. "Absolute silence in my courtroom!" Alicia froze her mouth open. "Bailiff," Barnett roared, "stand by the plaintiff's table. If Mrs. Hayes or Mr. Hayes speak one more word, one more syllable, you will remove them in handcuffs. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Your Honor," the bailiff said, moving to stand directly behind Brandon. Judge Barnett was breathing heavily. He looked at Alicia and Brandon with a look of such profound contempt I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "You," he said, pointing a shaking finger at them. "You too. You stand in this sacred place. You lie. You commit perjury. You try to defraud a member of your own family. You file false medical reports. You conspire to commit a felony. You are an embarrassment to this city, an embarrassment to your family." He was shaking his head, his voice filled with disgust. "But you know what the worst part is? The worst part of all of this? It's the arrogance, the disrespect, the absolute blind ignorance." He turned his gaze on Alicia. You have any idea who this man is?" Alicia was trembling, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. He's my father. He's just an accountant. He's a confused old man." Judge Barnett laughed. It was a sharp, bitter, frightening sound that echoed in the silent room. "An accountant," he boomed. "An accountant? Ma'am, you are a fool. You don't even know your own father." He pointed at me, but he was speaking to the entire courtroom. "This man, Uncle Amos, as my father taught me to call him, this man balanced the books for the entire Southern Christian Leadership Conference. This man personally managed the finances for the Atlanta voter registration drives in the 60s. This man single-handedly, with nothing but a ledger and a sharp pencil, exposed 3 corrupt city councilmen in 1982 who were stealing from our school system when no one else, not even the DA, would dare touch them." And the judge was almost shouting now, his voice raw with a passion I had not heard since his father Thurgood was alive. This man sat at his Sunday dinner table with my father and me and taught me, more about ethics and justice and the true meaning of the law than Harvard University ever did. This man," he said, his voice dropping but losing none of its power, "was my father's best friend. This man held me when my father was buried." He leaned over the bench, his eyes locked on Alicia and Brandon, who looked as if they had been turned to stone. "You didn't just file a petition against a confused old man. You didn't just try to steal a house. You committed fraud against a living, breathing monument of this city. And you did it. In my courtroom." He held his gaze for a 10 count, the silence in the room so total it was deafening. The other people on the benches were staring at me, their mouths open. The bailiff was looking at me with a new profound respect. Judge Barnett finally sat down. He picked up his gavel. "Mr. Riley," he said, his voice now calm but utterly final, "your motion to dismiss is granted." Judge Barnett's words echoed in the stunned silence. "Motion to dismiss is granted." But he wasn't finished. He looked at the bailiff, who was still standing next to my daughter and son-in-law. "Bailiff," Judge Barnett said, his voice now a calm, cold instrument of the law, This is no longer a probate matter, this is a criminal one. I am remanding Mr. Brandon Hayes and Mrs. Alicia Hayes into custody on suspicion of perjury, conspiracy to commit fraud, and felony elder abuse. I am also ordering the District Attorney's Office to open an immediate investigation into their actions, as well as the actions of a Mr. Alan Fields and a Mr. Michael Roper. The bailiff, who had been waiting for this, unclipped his handcuffs. Sir, ma'am, please stand up and place your hands behind your backs. Brandon Hayes just stared dumbly. Wait, what custody? You can't be serious. But Alicia finally broke. The rage, the greed, the arrogance had all dissolved in an instant, replaced by a raw primal terror. No! She shrieked a sound that clawed at the air. No, please, Judge, please, we made a mistake. It was a misunderstanding. The bailiff took Brandon's arm. Brandon, a man who had built his life on cheap bluster, simply crumpled. He offered no resistance. The fight was gone. He was a hollow man. The bailiff then moved to Alicia, and the click, the metallic final click of the handcuffs locking around Brandon's wrists, sent her into a full-blown panic. She lunged not at the bailiff, but at me. She stumbled trying to get to my table, her hands reaching out. Dad! The bailiff caught her arm. Ma'am, you need to... Dad, Daddy, please, she wailed. It was the name she hadn't used since she was a little girl. Daddy, please tell them you don't mean it. Tell them it was a mistake. I'm your daughter. I'm your little girl. Please, Daddy, don't let them do this. Don't let them take me. She was sobbing, her face a mess of tears and makeup. The mask was gone. This was the real Alicia, a terrified, selfish child realizing for the first time that her actions had real, permanent consequences. All eyes in the courtroom turned to me. They were waiting for the confused old man to save his daughter, waiting for the good Christian father to show mercy. I stood up. I looked at my daughter, my only child, as the bailiff gently, firmly pulled her hands behind her back. I looked into her pleading, terrified eyes, and I said nothing. I simply looked at her. I let her see the truth in my face. I was not her daddy. I was Amos Freeman, and the time for mercy was over. Dad, she whispered, her voice breaking as she understood. Dad, no. You did this, Alicia, I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the silent room. You and he, you made your choice. You chose a house over your father. Now you live with it. I turned away from her. I adjusted the front of my suit jacket, making it hang straight. I looked at Quentin Riley, and I nodded once, a nod of profound thanks. He nodded back, a small, satisfied smile on his lips. Then I turned to the bench. Judge Barnett was watching me. The anger was gone from his face. He just looked tired, and he looked proud. This court is adjourned, he said, banging the gavel one last time. As the bailiff began to lead a sobbing Alicia and a silent, ghostly, pale Brandon out a side door, Judge Barnett spoke again, his voice now soft just for me. Uncle Amos. I stopped and looked at him. It is good to see you, sir, he said. It's been too long. It has, Robbie, I said, calling him by the name only his family ever used. It has. She would have been proud of you today, he said, his eyes glancing up at the ceiling as if he were talking to her. Lucille, she would have loved the fire. She would have enjoyed it, I agreed. And your father Thurgood, he would have been proud of you. You run a fine courtroom, son. A small, sad smile touched the judge's lips. Thank you, Uncle Amos. Take care of yourself. You as well, Judge, I said. I turned. Quentin held the low wooden gate open for me. I walked down the center aisle. I did not rush. I did not look back. I heard my daughter's sobs fading as the door closed behind her. Every person I passed, the other families, the lawyers, the court staff, stared at me. They weren't staring at a confused old man. They were staring at Amos Freeman. I pushed open the heavy doors of courtroom 3B and stepped out into the hallway, the sound of the door closing firmly behind me. It was done. The books were balanced. It's been 1 week. 1 week since the sound of a gavel brought my old life crashing down and built a new one from the pieces. The house is quiet. But it's not the heavy, suffocating silence of that first day. It's the old silence. The one I shared with Lucille. It's the sound of peace. It's the sound of order restored. I'm in the kitchen brewing a fresh pot of coffee when I hear a knock. It's not the aggressive bang of my son-in-law. It's a polite, firm rap. Quentin Riley is at the door, but he's not in his courtroom armor. He's wearing a simple polo shirt. He's holding a small box of pastries. "Mr. Freeman," he says, smiling. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought you might like an update. And some of that coffee I smell," I say, letting him in. We sit at my kitchen table, the one they thought they would sell. "So tell me, son," I say, pouring him a cup. "It's a complete mess for them," Quentin says, taking a sip. "As it should be. Brandon is facing a mountain of charges: bank fraud, conspiracy, perjury, the felony elder abuse. His developer partners at Apex have cut him loose and are suing him for misrepresentation. He's lost his broker's license. He's finished. He will be going to prison for a long time." "And Alicia?" I ask, my voice steady. Quentin's face softens a little. "She's also facing charges. Perjury, conspiracy. The DA might offer her a deal, probation maybe if she testifies against Brandon, but either way, she's lost everything. Her reputation, her credit, her family." I nod slowly, staring into my coffee cup. There's no joy in this, no victory, just the sad, inevitable result of a sum that was always destined to be negative. "The price of greed," I say softly. "It's always higher than you expect." Quentin nods. "They're trying to make bail. But their accounts are frozen. The same accounts they froze you out of. The irony is thick." After he leaves, I walk into my living room. I stand in front of the fireplace, looking up at the photograph of Lucille. She's smiling, her eyes full of fire, just like she was in 1972 when we signed those trust papers. My name is Amos Freeman, and I am 74 years old. I've spent my whole life being quiet. I was a quiet man, a good husband, a reliable father. I thought my retirement would be the same. I thought it meant fading away, becoming invisible. But I learned something. I learned that sometimes your silence doesn't protect you. It just gives the bullies, the greedy, the arrogant, it gives them permission to get louder. My daughter laughed when I walked into that courtroom. She laughed because she thought I was weak. My son-in-law looked away because he thought I was worthless. They both made the same fatal mistake. They mistook my kindness for weakness. They mistook my silence for confusion. They forgot where I came from. They forgot who I was. And most of all, they forgot who she was. They learned that day that even an old accountant, a confused old man, knows how to balance the books. And justice, like numbers, always has to add up in the end. I reach up and gently wipe a speck of dust from the photo frame. "We did it, Lucille," I whisper. "Your legacy is safe." What do you think of my story, and what city are you watching from? I'd really love to read your thoughts in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, you can support me by hitting that like button, and please subscribe to the channel so I can keep bringing more stories just like this one. Thank you so much for listening. Here is the lesson I learned, the one that stays with me. The greatest mistake a predator can make is to misjudge its prey. My children saw my kindness not as a strength, but as a weakness to be exploited. They mistook my silence not as patience, but as incompetence. They forgot that the quietest man in the room is often the one who has been keeping score the entire time. You must never ever let anyone else define your worth, especially not those who have proven they don't know your value. What would you have done in my position? Let me know in the comments.